Well, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, and it is June 29th. We've just got one day after this left of June, and then we are jumping into July. Hard to believe. We are nearly halfway through the year already. That is crazy. So we are done with the book, or the 22nd chapter of the book of Acts, and today, so we're going to look at the 23rd chapter. We're going to start with verses 1 to 11 today. And if you remember, Paul was just about to be beaten, and he said, "I'm a citizen," and so they let him off. And since the magistrate couldn't figure out, or the tribune couldn't find out what was going on by beating it out of Paul, he decided to call the Sanhedrin together and the council together and find out what's going on here and see if he can't figure it out. Good luck with that. And we'll find out today. So we left off the 30th verse of chapter 22, ended like this. Since he wanted to find out, and this is the tribune, find out what Paul was being accused of by the Jews, the next day he released him and ordered the chief priests and the entire council to meet. He brought Paul down and had him stand before them. So Paul is standing before the council. Excuse me. Apologize. Let's jump into chapter 23. While Paul was looking intently at the council, he said, "Brothers, up to this day I have lived my life with a clear conscience before God." Then the high priest, Ananias, ordered those standing near him to strike him on the mouth. At this Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting there to judge me according to the law, and yet in violation of the law you order me to be struck?" Those standing nearby said, "Do you dare to insult God's high priest?" And Paul said, "I did not realize, brothers, that he was high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a leader of your people." Then Paul noticed that some of the Sadducees and others were Pharisees. He called out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I am on trial concerning the hope of the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dissension began between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, or angel, or spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge all three. Then a great clamor arose, and certain scribes of the Pharisees group stood up and contended, "We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel had spoken to him?" When the dissension became violent, the tribune, fearing that they would tear Paul to pieces, ordered the soldiers to go down, take him by force, and bring him into the barracks. That night the Lord stood near him and said, "Keep up your courage, for just as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must bear witness also in Rome." All right. Paul is standing up there and saying that with a clear conscience he has lived his life according to the law. And the high priest, of course, takes offense at that, because the high priest, no doubt, has heard about this whole thing with the circumcision and all of that. So the high priest calls out for someone to strike Paul, and it doesn't say that they did, but one would assume that probably somebody attempted to, at least. And then Paul uses, in verse 3, at this Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall." I don't know, am I the only one that's reminded of Jesus saying back in Matthew, in the 23rd chapter, in verse 27 actually, this is where in chapter 23 he lists the seven woes that Jesus lists, and this is one of them. "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of bones of the dead and everything unclean." And for some reason, when I hear this whitewashed wall, that's the same thing. You look pretty, but there's a lot of nastiness behind that white paint. And so that's an insult to the high priest. And of course, they cry out to him, "How dare you insult the high priest?" And I think that here, this is where we need some emoticons or something here. I think Paul's answer to this is fairly flippant. I don't think that Paul was unaware of who the high priest was. I have a hard time believing that. So his reply that I didn't know that was the high priest. More like that I didn't know that because he wasn't acting like a high priest. Is kind of the way I read that. I could be wrong. I'm interjecting some emotion into that. But then he goes on and says, if he truly was the believer or the leader, then I wouldn't speak evil to him. Is kind of the way I read that last part. You shall not speak evil of a leader of your people. Excuse me. I apologize again. Then Paul takes a different track, and he's well aware that you've got Pharisees and Sadducees there, and that Pharisees and Sadducees, there's a hot button you can push with them, and that's the resurrection. And of course, what he's talking about is the resurrection of Christ, Jesus' resurrection, the belief that Jesus came back to life into the world. It was the beginning of the resurrection with Jesus. So by bringing that up, he's set the Pharisees against the Sadducees, and the whole thing just breaks down from there. They can't agree on that, and of course they're arguing. The Sadducees are angry with Paul, and at this point the Pharisees, at least on this point, have to protect Paul. And it's interesting. Excuse me. As I've mentioned before, when James the Just, Jesus' brother, we've talked about him quite a bit in Acts, when he was martyred, and I know I mentioned this, in 63 or thereabouts, AD, the Pharisees, the ones that called the high priest on the carpet over that and got the high priest deposed. So there is some faction of the Pharisees that is, at least in some regards, in some mild way, supportive, or that at some point they'll back them up. So, but we see that in politics today, don't we? Where you may disagree on some things, but there are other points where you'll back people up, and that's good in some ways. But here, after all of this craziness, after them turning on him for speaking the truth, and guess what, folks? When you speak the truth in the world's going to come after you. It's just the way it is. And verse 11 is where we're going to leave this one. That night the Lord stood near him and said, "Keep up your courage." When we're going through a tough time, it's something that's said over and over, a million times over, that God is with you. But he truly is. He truly, really is. And that's the point in time when we need to reach out for him and ask for his grace, or ask for his support and his grace, even when we don't feel like we want to. Even when we're so angry or so upset or so afraid that we don't want to. We just want to curl up in a ball and disappear. That's when we need keep up our courage and reach out to him. So that's where I'm going to leave you at today with this. I apologize for my head acting up this morning. I'm not feeling the best today. I don't know why. But have a very blessed day, and please, please, please be a blessing to someone today. Tell them about Jesus. All right? Talk to you all in the morning. Bye-bye.